Thank you. All right, so I would like to show you this slide first, where you see the most recent reflections about the new digital technologies and their impact on our jobs, which we have in the media. So these are some of the most recent titles. In the New York Times, for instance, the long-term jobs killer is not China, it's automation. Then there was a special report dedicated to AI and jobs. In The Economist, with the title Automation and Anxiety. The Guardian used another title, After the Robot Revolution, What Will Be Left for Our Children to Do, and so on and so on. So there are many articles dedicated to particular professions like lawyers, for instance, who could be the next profession to be replaced by the computers with the invention of AI, RAS by IBM, and so on. So there are lots of titles which you will find in the media, and I'm sure that you did so. I asked myself, how did this perception of the impact of technology on our jobs develop over time? And then I looked into the cover pages of Der Spiegel, which is the most influential magazine, basically weekly news in Germany. And I found out that, well, this is not a new story, actually. So the first cover page dedicated to this topic appeared in 1964, where you see the multi-arm robot kicking out a poor blue-collar worker from his job at an assembly line. Then only 15 years later, in 1978, we have a very similar picture. Now it's the computer revolution, at the dawn of the computer revolution. And what it says here, the title, "The progress makes you unemployed." So again, a blue-collar worker, probably a construction worker, being kicked out by a robot. And most recently in 2016, the title, "Sie sind entlassen," which means in German, "you are hired." So it's a wordplay if you consider that this issue appeared in about 2 months before the presidential elections in the US. So if you consider this narrative, basically, the representation of a robot did not change a lot, right? What changed a little bit is the human who is being kicked out by the machine. So it used to be a blue-collar worker. Now it's more like a manager, a white-collar. The question is it something new, what we have now, or we already had this before? So how can we deal with the new computer, with the AI revolution? And another question which I asked myself when I found these pictures is, well, where's the woman on the cover of the Spiegel? Why did the woman manage to be on the cover of Spiegel? All right, so let's have a look at the historical evidence. Is there need for panic? Actually, we observe it already since centuries. Of course, we know, all of us know, the Luddites movement of English textile artisans who basically had they were very fearful about their jobs, and so they started to destroy the machines, the new machines that were created in this textile industry in the early 19th century. More recently, Wassily Leontief, who was a Nobel laureate in economics, he was famous for comparing humans with horses because he said that, well, what happened to horses 100 years ago? They became unemployed with the invention of a car. This is something which is going to happen to us humans as well. And then he also added that it is not a good strategy to retrain people to operate the computers because there will not be enough computers to go for everyone. Okay, so you see that this threat, this anxiety, this negative emotion was already there, and of course humans always were very fearful about technology and the protection of their jobs. Well, first of all, I think that we should say that it is natural for technologies to save labor. So technologies are there to make us humans more efficient, to save some labor. But so far, technological progress has led to more well-being. So now, compared to 100 years ago, we work less working hours, we have higher incomes, certain populations don't have to work, like children, for instance, if you compare 150 years ago, children had to work. Well, we have high life standards due to technological progress. Well, one of the arguments which is quite strong coming from the economic perspective is that, well, so far we didn't observe a very strong long-term increase in unemployment rates. Of course, it's a very volatile thing, and sometimes unemployment rates go up and down, but in the long-term perspective, we don't observe a strong increase in unemployment rates. And this is because there is a rising demand for skills that cannot be replaced by machines. Well, of course, there is another perspective. Could this time be different? And why should we think that this time could be different? Well, first of all, because AI, digital technologies, are able to replace many tasks at different skill levels. So it's not just blue-collar workers. Well, we have different types of AI, and digital technologies enter very different areas. And, well, there are also speculations concerning the technological singularity argument, which is basically about whether there will be a strong type of AI which will, replace all humans and take over, right? So this one concern, that AI is going to replace humans at different skill levels. Well, another concern is, of course, well, you could argue many jobs will be created because, of course, someone will be needed to maintain the machines. But then we have the predictive maintenance of machines in Industry 4.0, which means that machines can well, basically maintain themselves by predicting the probability of breaking down in the next time period. So, and also some researchers did analysis and they observed that, well, how many jobs have been created recently in new industries that emerged since 2000? Not that many, only 0.5% of US labor force work in industries that have been created since 2000. So all these considerations, all this anxiety has led to the revival of the debate about the need for the universal basic income. And we know in some countries, also in Finland, there were experiments concerning the impact of the UBI on motivation of workers and so on. So this is something which is related, strongly related to this anxiety that our jobs are going to be replaced by machines. What are some of the approaches to understand how technology affects our jobs? And one of the most prevailing approaches in the labor market literature is very simple, actually. Let's see what machines can do to our jobs. And in this way, we can better understand which skills will be in demand in the future. So this approach, which is also called the task-based approach, was created in 2003 by three authors, author Levi and Marnain, and this approach is also called by their names ALM approach. So their idea was very simple. Basically, what technology can do is to replace the routine-based tasks. So we have two different types of tasks the occupations consist of: the routine-based tasks and the non-routine tasks. So routine tasks can be easily codified and thus performed by the machines, by computers. And these tasks can be both manual and cognitive. So for instance, cognitive tasks could be mathematical calculations in bookkeeping, while manual tasks could be executing of a repetitive and precise physical operation in production tasks. So this is nothing new. We already see that many jobs in this in these areas have been replaced by machines. On the other hand, we have the occupations that rely more on non-routine tasks. And according to this approach, we have non-routine manual tasks and non-routine abstract tasks. So non-routine manual tasks are manual tasks that, that are performed in unstructured environments, unstable environments. For instance, you can think of driving a car. So it's a manual task, but it's always, we have different environment and we have to adjust to this environment, right? So it's not a structured environment. So it's manual dexterity. This non-routine manual tasks could be interpersonal communication, interactions, could be visual and language recognition. So we have many jobs that rely on these tasks, such as serving jobs, cleaning jobs, health assistance and caregiving. Right, so here we already see that some of these tasks can be performed by AI. So if you think of visual and language recognition, AI is already quite well at these tasks. And finally, non-routine abstract tasks, which is basically creativity, problem-solving capabilities, negotiation, persuasion, it's emotional intelligence, empathy, it's social intelligence, and entrepreneurial abilities. So this is something which is considered the skills of the future, which cannot be replaced by AI, although we see that there are also attempts to develop AI which can, for instance, cheat in a poker game, also becoming more emotional. So also here there are attempts to enter into this field. So you see this model, it was a very good model in explaining the previous wave of digitalization, the tasks that can be codified, that can be replaced very quickly and easily by machines, but non-routine tasks cannot be replaced by machines. So here you see that with the new digital technologies, this model is not very convincing, and this all obviously explains why we have all those titles in the newspapers and journals that evoke the feelings of anxiety in us. And so again, so here you see in this approach, it's again the idea is to see how machines are going to replace humans in our job. And well, what in my current research, we try to rethink this idea, and we introduce with my co-author, we introduce a very simple model which explains the impact of digital technologies on jobs in a in a two-dimensional way, not just one dimension, the destructive digitalization, which jobs are going to be replaced, but we also introduce a different dimension, which is the transformative digitalization. So we can consider this scheme here, which is very simple. So on the x-axis, we have the destructive digitalization. So if it is high, then the technology can replace the job. And transformative digitalization is how digitalization transforms the occupation without necessarily replacing it. So here, the human collaborates with the machine, while destructive digitalization means that the job can be replaced by the machine. And so if we think about the technology in this way, we can identify 4 distinct groups of occupations. So the most interesting group is the rising stars. Here, AI, new technologies, digital technologies have a strong transformative impact on occupations, but the occupations are not going to disappear. So they are going to be restructured, and here humans will become more productive by means of collaborating with the machines. We have also the machine terrain occupations. Here, the occupations will be transformed in a very strong way by means of new digital technologies, such that they will basically become obsolete. The collapsing occupations, these are occupations which rely basically on the routine tasks. We can automate them already quite easily. So here the destructive digitalization is very, very high. And finally, we have still occupations which are not affected by digital technologies, which are here termed as human terrain occupations. So here, we don't have much impact from AI, and also the destructive digitalization is very low. Very quickly, to validate our model, how can we measure the destructive and the transformative digitalization? So we use two measures. For the destructive digitalization, it's quite straightforward. We just use the computerization probability, which has been provided by Fry and Osborne, who work for the University of Oxford, and this approach that they propose has become very famous, and this basically created the wave of the news about the future of occupations. So they basically, what they do, they try to understand which jobs are going to be replaced by machines in the next 10 to 20 years, viewed from 2013. So they asked experts to make a prediction, well, basically to hand label the occupations of which they were very certain that these occupations are going to disappear. So for instance, taxi driver. So, and then in the next step, which is going to disappear according to this expert. And then in the next step, they applied the machine learning techniques to predict the probability of computerization for all occupations in the US. So this is quite straightforward to operationalize, to use this measure to operationalize the destructive digitalization. For the transformative digitalization, we use the past advances in AI, which is a combined measure that comes from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. So this foundation basically tries to collect the data about the advances in different areas of AI in the past, so the pace of the advances. And then the authors from which we got this measure, Felton et al., they and colleagues, they actually used this measure to map it to the tasks in occupation. So we were able basically to merge this measure with the occupations, on the occupational level. So just to give you an idea about what is going on here in this AI, advances in AI measure, so they have different areas of AI. For instance, image recognition or translation, how fast was the progress in this area, or translation or voice recognition. So one example of measure which enters to this index, it's image recognition. So here what we see here is that from 2010 to 2016, the progress in this area of AI, image recognition, has been very fast. Basically, the error rate of prediction fell from 30% in 2010, and now it converged basically with the level of error rate which is common of humans, about 5%. So now it's even lower. And this is not surprising if you think about, for instance, recognition of cancer cells. So for humans, it might be very difficult to recognize this cell. But for AI, which is trained on similar pictures, it's quite easy. So you see how strong the progress has been in this particular area. All right, so now when we plot the occupations here on this chart, basically this model, which I presented before, we see, well, basically the bubbles here represent occupations. So one bubble, one occupation. The size of the bubble is how many workers are in this occupation. So the bigger the bubble, the more people work in this occupation. So don't you see that? Well, we have a very interesting distribution here. We see that most occupations are either the rising stars, lots of transformative digitalization, but jobs are not going to disappear, or collapsing occupations, jobs that can be automated very easily. We also see that about 11% of total employment in the US are in the so-called machine terrain occupations. Here we have lots of transformation, that much that the job is going to disappear. And we still have about 13% of people who are not affected by digital, whose jobs are not affected by digital technologies, who are in these human terrain occupations. So to give you an example, rising star occupation, surgeon or physician. So here, obviously, a physician works with the digital technologies, but nobody's going to replace a physician or a surgeon by a machine. Machine terrain occupation, a taxi driver. So here you see, this is a very interesting case because taxi driver, which I explained before, it's a non-routine manual skills, right? It's something, you cannot create a robot which is so dexterous that it can, well, basically replace the taxi driver, but AI came into this occupation, right? So we don't need to develop such a dexterous robot anymore. We use a different technology. So here the transformation was so strong that the job is going to disappear probably. So technologically, it is quite possible. Collapsing occupation, cashiers, so self-checkout service robots. I think it's already there. It's only the matter of time how long we will need the human cashiers. And the human terrain, well, cleaners, for instance. So here again, finger dexterity is very important for these people. It's very difficult to replace them in this occupation. Just to briefly summarize the findings, what does it mean if your occupation falls into one of these categories? What does it mean for an individual? Well, for the rising stars occupations, what we found out is that highly educated individuals are mostly affected by this technology. So meaning that, of course, technology makes you very productive, however, and this is a very stable job. And what? It's done. Can I still continue? Okay. I have to sum up. Okay, so right. So the news is that the rising stars occupations makes you very productive, but of course here you have to adapt yourself. So you have to learn new things and in order to remain productive in these jobs. Right, so machine terrain collapsing occupations, usually low job stability, high probability of becoming unemployed, and low wage growth. So you need to probably gain new qualifications. And human terrain occupations are very highly stable, but usually low paid jobs. So I wanted to come to my topic, the gender bias. Here, of what we see here, I just plotted the occupations. Well, the pink bubbles are female-dominated occupations, which are basically more than 70% of female employment, and male-dominated occupations are blue bubbles. So what we see here on the first glance, we have well, more males in machine terrain occupations, more females in human terrain. So this chart is probably better to explain the differences. So what we see here, the gender bias might arise from the fact that there are more female workers in the human terrain occupations, so occupations that are not affected by digital technologies. But the male workforce is more likely to be present in the machine terrain occupations. Also, what we see here that AI in general is less likely to affect female jobs than male jobs. So the transformative AI. And if I may, just to finalize, because I want to be a little bit provocative in the end. 5, it wasn't 0. Oh, so well, okay, then it's fine. I didn't see well. All right, so just to basically, so it's clear here what is the gender bias coming from the digital technologies. Well, first of all, the opportunities for women are there. So if you look at the distribution of male and female employment in the rising stars category, so where there is lots of transformative digitalization, then we see that there's a little, basically the same share of males and females working there, so which is good actually. So here we see that both of genders can benefit from transformative digitalization. Well, there are a little bit more women than men in the collapsing occupations. Why? Because, well, there are many service jobs that can be like cashiers, for instance, which I presented before, which can be replaced by AI, also by service robots. So we see, but more or less there is a balance, gender balance in the collapsing occupations. Right, so as I mentioned, the human terrain, women are less likely to be to work with technologies in their jobs, while for men, a different type of bias emerges that, well, they have to requalify themselves probably in order not to end up in the collapsing occupations. Well, this is kind of one part of the story, how digitalization is going to affect our jobs. And, to end my presentation, just maybe one thought, which I think this will become more important in the future. This is what I call the individual data capital. Is there new gender bias in the digital age? And individual data capital, what is that? Individual data capital is basically the digital data which can be, which are defined, big data defined at the level of individuals, which can be collected, stored, shared, and analyzed. And I like to call it data capital because you will see, I will give you examples. We need this investment in individual data capital in order to fully exploit the opportunities offered by digital technologies. Otherwise, there is a risk that, women or those people who don't have sufficient investments in individual data capital, they are likely to be excluded from labor markets, and there's also a possibility of financial exclusion. I'm going to give you two very brief examples how this might take place. So the first one from the use of AI in human resources management. So here, how can we use AI in human resources management? There are different possibilities. Most widespread is, first of all, the recruitment of personnel. So if you have data, data capital, there you are more likely to be found by the employers, by the potential employers. And also, particularly the first rounds of interviews, job interviews, are more likely nowadays in big companies to be conducted in an automated way. So you don't talk to a human, but you have the first or even the second round of jobs interviews, you have to talk with the AI, also analyzes your data. So meaning that if you don't have enough data capital, well, probably you will not get the job. Also, staff training. Here, they use the individual data capital is used in order to find the best training for you based on your interests, based on your personality, on your strengths, and so on. Again, so here the possibility would be, given that the data capital is not sufficient, that, well, the training you will be offered will not be the best one for you. So this shows how the insufficient individual data capital might lead to labor market exclusion. And my second example is from the application of AI in FinTech. FinTech is financial technology services, which are quite popular nowadays, especially for providing financial capital to underfinanced populations. Here, basically, the risk assessment is being conducted for, credit scoring, let's say, based on behavioral and transactional data. So again, just one example from China. They had a very interesting program which was called 10,000 Women. This program was supposed to support female entrepreneurs in regions in less developed regions in China, and these women, they were very poor, so they were not able to set up a business, although they had a business idea, and they had no chance to get financial capital from the investors, because they didn't have usual traditional securities like home and so on. So within this program, these women, their data were analyzed, and the result of this program was that based on the behavioral transactional data, these women increased the likelihood of getting a loan by 50%, which is a lot. So again, here, if you don't have the individual data capital, the risk is that you are financially excluded. And so the final example is the digital financial counseling, again, based on the individual data. So this is something which can improve your financial competence, but usually the human financial consultant is very expensive. So here is a way to overcome this barrier. Okay, insufficient data capital leads to financial exclusion. There are several reasons why we might lack the investment into individual data capital, which I skip. I know we can forward this for the discussion. Just to summarize my talk, 3 main messages to take away. Is digitalization a new challenge for labor markets? Yes and no. No, because we already had it before. Always new technologies coming to the labor markets, and a challenge. Yes, because this is now different skills are going to be affected. Women are differently affected than men by digitalization. They have different risks, but also different opportunities. And my final point is individual data capital promotes labor market inclusion and financial inclusion, but we need to be very mindful about investment into this data capital. Thank you so much.